Today on Locked On Rockies, it's more difficult than we think to keep the right guys, but sometimes it's hard to not be frustrated by the Rockies' history of letting certain players go.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the first day of November in the year 2023. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You are in the right spot, because that's what we do around here is talk Rockies baseball all week long here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find us also on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where your subscription is the best way to help the show grow. Seriously, folks, that subscription, massive help for the show. You get to see the video portion of the podcast. You can leave your Rockies hot takes in the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section, and lots more just by giving us your support. Because if you support me, then that means I can bring you more podcasts and talk Rockies baseball with you. We all love Rockies baseball. It's what we're here for. I am your Rockies fan extraordinaire, Paul Holden. Been following this team my entire life, bringing you your Rockies podcast for over 3 seasons now here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And today I wanted to talk about something that I was kind of thinking about after Jon Gray's performance. I also want to talk about Jon Gray a little bit too. And it kind of goes in with what we were talking about with the front office not speaking up. And I don't want to go when I go into these things, and when I go into episodes like on Monday and such. I mean, being a critical is fair, and I will never not speak my piece in my mind about my thoughts on the team and my takes and such. But it's tough. I mean, running a team, keeping players, and being able to have the hindsight and the foresight to know which players are worth keeping is a tough job to do. It just circles back to the overall hesitation and concern that I have with the Rockies organization getting the most out of its players now and fully understanding the caliber of players that they have. When Jon Gray is on pitching in the World Series and is dominant, and when he has had successful stretches his entire career in Texas, injuries still up, and it's nothing flashy. He's not the ace of aces, but he has been a good pitcher. I really just wondered, like, what happens in those situations? What really is the breakdown there? And when do the Rockies in their organizational, like what is the deal breaker for the Rockies when it comes to retaining some of these guys, or how do they miss out on not getting the same potential and having the same approach or being able to dive deeper into some of these pitchers that other teams have been successful at? Hoffman was pitching out in Philly, and of course we just, like we mentioned there, of course, Jon Gray pitching and Tyler Anderson. I know this year wasn't that great for him, but he saw success after leaving and XYZ. I mean, was it? Pierce Johnson just got himself a nice little deal there with Atlanta after getting the trade. So I do really want to know more about what that takes. And I do want to know more about how the Rockies evaluate and prepare themselves to evaluate talent. I just really wonder if the Rockies are able to see the same things, are focused on the same things, or why, or where their philosophy differs, especially when it comes to pitching. Because as we know, the pitching issues are not going to be fixed anytime soon, and really not likely that they're going to bring in anyone too big and fancy here. Reading from Thomas Harding's Rockies Beat newsletter today that he sent out Depending on how the offseason overall goes, there is a case for all three when it comes to retaining Chase Anderson, Chris Flexen, and Brent Suter. The Rockies are going to need all the pitching they can get. This is interesting from Harding here, and I think this taps in as well with the Rockies and their inability to keep the right players. I think keeping Brent Suter is the right move for the Rockies, but as Harding writes here, the toughest to keep will be Suter, who pitched under playoff pressure with the Brewers before joining the Rockies. Suter finished with a 3.38 ERA, but that figure didn't climb into the threes until August. Suter, 34, expressed to the Rockies he is interested in being re-signed, but he will explore the market. Even if the Rockies are a fallback, they tend to account for themselves well in the relief market. In 23, Suter was a waiver claim from the Brewers, and Pierce Johnson and Brad Hand signed as free agents and pitched well enough for the Braves to acquire them at the trade deadline. So that's an interesting nugget there. I truly thought it was going to be a pretty big slam dunk for the Rockies to bring Brent Suter back, and with him expressing the interest. But I know that the expressing the interest, you shouldn't buy that much into it. But when the Rockies have opportunities to keep solid pitchers around that express interest in pitching at Coors Field, why miss out on that? What do the Rockies gain by missing out on Brent Suter next year? And you don't need to go and give Brent Suter a 4-year deal. That's not what I'm asking. I'm just saying something on the low, in that reliever market, if you go on the back end of a deal, you can at least ride it out. The Daniel Bard experience has been up and down, sure, but Daniel Bard has also given a lot of solid play for the Rockies over the years and has had really high moments of success. This year was an exception, but even someone that the Rockies stuck with for a bit, Daniel Bard, he's contributed to this team. Again, this year was exception to the rule, as with a pretty big step back, but this is a guy the Rockies have now stuck with for the 4 years, 3.5 really with COVID year, counting in that. But you don't have to overcommit, but you have to be willing to commit. And I think that's probably something that I don't understand all that well. And we as Rockies fans and people that aren't on the inside know as well. That's a hard line to walk. It's a hard thing to navigate and a hard thing to figure out all the logistics and things. I mean, just because I sit here and play an outside the park baseball league and talk on a Rockies podcast, I know I don't have all the answers. But it highlights when the Rockies are missing out on players. And when the Rockies have someone like John Gray that wants to stick with them and could easily match the deal that the Rangers gave to John Gray, it makes me concerned because, again, I think the Rockies are further behind. And I'll dive more into what I think after I tell you about the title sponsor of the episode. I'm overdue talking about them. Let's talk about them now here before we dive into segment number 2. It's FanDuel. FanDuel's got you covered all football season long, and you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Yes, that's right. If you're confident in your Denver Broncos, maybe you want to go to the Nuggets. Maybe you want to go to, who knows? Just check it out. Maybe you're confident in a division rival. Maybe you're confident in your significant other's favorite team money line. Check out all of the great betting options available at FanDuel, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And don't miss out on that $150 in bonus bets when you win a $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can enjoy that bonus offer. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network and on your favorite streaming services and the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show by subscribing and firing off your Rockies hot takes, letting me know what's on your mind about the Colorado Rockies. We're talking about the Rockies' ability to bring players in and it being, I would imagine a tough job, a tough sell, but how do you change that? And how do you continue to be able to make the Nolan Jones type moves, make the smaller moves that show that you might be the ones getting the benefit of the bounce back from the player, the player that needs some new scenery? Well, I think it, again, circles back to the Rockies needing to just invest more across the board in player development and research. As we're learning that there wasn't even video teams at all of the levels of the Rockies until this past year. Until the Rockies made the moves at the trade deadline, they were on track to do the same type of stuff that they've done before, overcommitment to veterans on expiring contracts. So how do the Rockies make it convincing? Well, you can make it a little, increase a little bit money, pay a little bit more cheddar to some of these guys, which they can do that. I mean, here's the deal. I think it's more worth it for the Rockies when they're looking at using their money to do 2-year more expensive splash deals with some of these names than their 4, 5, 3-year long-term commitments that they give to some of these players in some of their extensions. It just gets further complicated. The Daniel Bard situation is one, and we saw about the super bullpen in the past, and we've seen from the Ian Desmond contracts. We're seeing it from the Chris Bryant contract. The Rockies are not able to maximize the value on the field of a lot of these contracts. They're getting below what they're paying for more often than not. So the hesitation really should be, let's put the money and the effort towards the right people. And again, it's not like the Rockies, just if they're going to open up their wallets, they're going to be able to go and get the biggest free agent pitchers. But they're going to be more convincing to some people when they can go up and offer something a little bit more lucrative for a shorter term deal and then allow that relationship to start and go from there. Hey, this Rockies team is on the rise and pitching at Coors Field. Isn't it? I'm showing that I can handle it and navigate it. Then you can start working your way into adding up and extensions and going from there. Or those players can move on and you're not in it for the long term. You can rebound, rebuild, and give yourself the time during that contract to hopefully either trade and replenish that position behind it as need be, especially when we're talking about pitchers, as the Rockies have a constant need for that. Or you have the time to make another trade for a prospect or a guy that's going to be MLB ready in that same type of situation. I just don't, with all of the doubts that we have about the Rockies in general in their front office, it's hard to really be confident in this team's ability to properly evaluate the talent and then get the deals done and maximize the potential of the deal and the commitment. All of this being said is, again, I'm not a sports manager. I'm not a GM. I'm not running the team. It's incredibly nuanced, I'm sure. The fact of the matter is the Rockies just haven't given us a long track record of being able to handle these moves, and it's on full display during the World Series. John Gray would be playing such a crucial role for this Rockies rotation right now. He would be, and arguably would be at the top, if not in that second spot, maybe behind Herman if he was healthy, but certainly would be number one in the rotation if he was still here. And the worst part about it is it's a guy you drafted. It's a guy you believed in. It's a guy that wanted to be a Rocky, that wanted to pitch for the Rockies, that wanted to be part of this team. But then it fizzles out. And I just don't understand how you can just sit and say, we're in the position we can let John Gray go. We're in a position where we think that we have something better, or we're going to find something better than John Gray. Because it's clear that it hasn't happened. This team can find hitters. Yes. This team can find defenders. Yes. But finding pitchers that want to stay here are so rare. And the fact that you can't match what Texas offered, that disappoints me, because that means that you thought you knew better. And I'm not trying to say that John Gray's the Cy Young best thing. I'm saying John Gray's a third to second arm in most rotations in Major League Baseball and would help the Rockies tremendously. And he also just stepped up in a massive situation in the World Series and got 4 huge or innings. Or he has 4. I think, is that throughout the postseason, or was it just in that appearance? Regardless, he has been a key contributor. He has been flexible. He has been a team player. He's been open-minded. He's been a competitor, and he's helped the Rangers win. So when I see John Gray, I'm pumped, because John Gray was awesome and John Gray was fun. And John Gray always had doubters in his ear and took the challenge of Coors Field head on. And it's awesome to see, but it's another example of a good Rockies player or a good Rockies pitcher doing it for another team in a big situation, in a big moment. And it's just a bummer that the Rockies, and it's not that John Gray would be the only piece, and it's not that John Gray didn't have his opportunities to help the Rockies in big moments. I know what happened. I know John Gray's history. I saw that wild card game. But he's still a guy that you're confident in, and he's still a guy that can step up to those in those moments, and still a guy that can be elite. And that type of guy has immense value. It's why I've believed in Herman, because I believe Herman's got a very similar thing. He's not gonna be the number one in a lot of rotations, but if he's gonna be the number one for the Rockies, he will be someone that can be successful. It's just another moment where we reflect and look as Rockies fans and be concerned with the abilities and the strengths of this front office. They just haven't impressed me when they've come to being able, when it's come to finding the right players in free agency and the contracts that they go after and give to people. And when it comes to retaining solid pitching, retaining pitching that wants to be there. I think one of the biggest mistakes in this rebuild and in this current stage for the Rockies is losing John Gray. I really do. There's just, when we see that type of stuff, it just kind of makes me feel. I shouldn't always be speaking on behalf of y'all. You might feel completely different. You might be, what are you romanticizing John Gray about? It's not, I'm not romanticizing John Gray. It's just, again, another moment where I'm sitting there and I'm not confident that the Rockies see the same guy that the Rangers see. And that goes for really a lot of these pitchers that have moved on and been successful. And some, again, just different places and different opportunities. That works. But when players come in, when a Brent Suter comes in, and when the Rockies make a nice, smart, solid waiver move, and you have the opportunity for him to be excited about and has expressed interest in coming back to the team, you got to go after that. In the right ways. You don't need, I'm not saying that you got to go overboard, but where's the aggression there? The Rockies love to extend players. I mean, look at who's still on the team and look at the deals that they've given up. It just doesn't seem to be the same when it comes to pitchers, or at least lately. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I'm not giving enough credit. Because all in all, like I said, the thing that started this is it proves how incredibly difficult it is to be a GM and navigate and build a roster and go through everything. I mean, to juggle all those and to construct a roster and to be able to keep track of everything sounds really, really tough. I just don't know. I just don't know what changes, or I don't know, or when we see the change, or what the thing is that we notice to really have more confidence in the Rockies' abilities to bring in a pitcher, bring in another name, bring in someone big, and bring them in on a deal that isn't like, whoa, isn't a deal where it's like, all right, we're committed to this for we're going head first. But that stuff's complicated. Contracts are complicated. Money's complicated. I just wish I felt better, more confident in the Rockies' ability to do that, and more confident in the Rockies' ability to stick with and identify and stick with the talent that they have and get the most out of that talent and maximize their potential. We'll see. We'll see how the Rockies go through this offseason. We'll see what's next for the Rockies, but wanted to read a little bit more here from Skylar Timmons on Good for John Gray here on Purple Row. This was out today. A large portion of the fan base couldn't be happier for Gray being able to be an important piece pitching in the World Series in the biggest spot for the Rangers. I fall in this category myself. Me too, Skylar. But it saddens me because it took leaving the Rockies for his current situation to ever become a reality. When the Rockies selected Gray with the 3rd overall pick in the 2013 draft, it was with the assertion that he would become a franchise staple and perhaps the best pitcher the team has ever seen. He worked his way through the minors and made his big league debut just 2 years later in 2015. From that point on, he was a solid member of the rotation, even if he didn't quite reach the heights and expectations that were laid upon him. He was able to utilize a heavy fastball and effective slider to get strikeouts while battling his way through a game. Heck, his 16 strikeout game almost feels like a franchise record that won't be broken anytime soon. Whether it be the struggles of altitude, the heavy expectations and pressure to be a pitching savior, or even injuries, Gray never fully became what the Rockies had hoped for. He had his moments when he was a good pitcher, but greatness eluded him. Still, the fact was clear in 2021 that Gray wanted to stay in purple for the rest of his career. It was well documented, and the team wanted him to stay, but instead they did not issue him a qualifying offer and also skimped out on the contract negotiations, which drove him into the arms of the Rangers. I mean, that's a huge bummer. I mean, it's just a massive, massive bummer. And good for John Gray to have his moment. Good for John Gray to be able to go and be in the biggest things. But gosh, I wish it was in purple. Man, and as Skylar points out here, he's getting the recognition that he deserves, and he's getting to be around people and getting into situations that he really never would have seen as a Colorado Rocky, at least at this current rate, and that's what's disappointing. So you can read more from that. There's some great more insight into John Gray from our man Skylar over there on Purple Row. Go check it out there. Read more about it, and don't miss out on Thomas Harding's Rockies Beat newsletter. We talked about that as well, so don't miss that. You'll definitely want to go read that throughout the off season. Let's get into one little big picture thing to close out the show, and it's, folks, you don't care about ratings, and you shouldn't care about ratings, because ratings aren't the things that matter to you, and ratings don't paint the biggest picture when it comes to the full story of viewership. Let's talk about that coming up here in segment number 3. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast, for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find your team every day. The Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. That's where you can find the video portion of the show, and you can be part of the show and help the show grow by clicking that subscribe button. Really, really do appreciate that. Folks, you're going to see, or it's already coming out, this World Series, lowest World Series ratings-wise, and blah, 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 blah. But really ask yourself, do you care about ratings? How much do ratings impact your life? If you've watched the games, have ratings or the viewership or anything impacted you? Have ratings impacted the quality of baseball? And if you didn't watch, is it really because there's an issue with the product, or it's just simply the fact that in a world and in a time where there is so much to consume and watch and enjoy and tune into, including two pretty darn good sports teams in your market, does that tell the bigger story? Is baseball really in trouble or have these big issues because the ratings? No. The World Series just happens at an incredibly incredibly populated time of sports content, of network TV content, of busy times of life and schedule. You're going to see this, and it's going to continue to be people to point and say, that's what happens, and when these teams are in and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter. And there's people, you listen to enough podcasts and you listen to enough people, the bigwigs that say this, the ratings are mostly just PR fluff and stuff. And you only really like to, the people use them as a downtrodden and a talking point when they're low. And then they use them as a selling point and a beefing up point when they're high. It doesn't accurately reflect how people are watching, when people are watching, and how people are enjoying the World Series. They might be watching it later. They might be how millions of people view content these days. They might be viewing it via social media and through the highlights and the engagement on those. There's a lot of factors in there. So don't let people sit there and say that, the ratings are down, to tell you that this has been a bad or an unentertaining World Series. I mean, the baseball has been good outside. I mean, even with that game that was a blowout last night, the D-backs were still fighting back into it. And there's still been a lot of things to really enjoy and great storylines in this World Series, and to just negate it just because of some ratings number that honestly more people than not don't care about. It's just more fuel for a crappy argument about that, why teams shouldn't be in the World Series or in the playoffs or this, when their teams won and their teams earned their spot in that World Series with the format and everything laid out in front of them. And I just think it's more lazy stuff, because again, it's just because the ratings say that they like the bigger markets where the most people live, crazy, doesn't mean that that's the highest quality, doesn't mean that should be the standard, doesn't mean that should be the only thing that we really focus and care about. It should be on the fact that baseball just had, you can really sit and be very encouraged about what can come next for baseball, including interesting and fun teams making the playoffs. I mean, if you're not going to sit here and say that viewership and interest in baseball was not increased this year, you're wrong. You're absolutely incorrect. More people cared about baseball and more people are interested about baseball in 2023, including the postseason and the World Series, than they have in a long, long time. The changes worked, and it's building a better audience for the game. And just because you don't have the biggest media markets, some of the biggest media markets in the world involved in the World Series, and the ratings are down, doesn't mean that it's not a success. I'm sure both of those teams are seeing and enjoying plenty of success. I saw an Arizona Diamondbacks team store line that was basically wrapped around and throughout the stadium. That is what the teams really care about, and it's way more about revenue sharing and way bigger picture stuff than just your old school, outdated, antiquated look at television engagement, which is ratings. Folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us. We appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. I didn't say it at the top, but I do want to let y'all know that today's episode was brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get a $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet at FanDuel. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Find us on your favorite streaming service. Find us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. For your second listen of the day, Locked On MLB's got you covered. For more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs got you covered here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.